Game preview time. 49ers versus Vikings. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. In this episode, we're going to go through key matchups a little bit more in depth than the key matchups video. If you check that out, great. If you haven't, go check it out. Also, we're going to get into some Wow That's Bold predictions. And then, of course, at the end, after talking it all out, we're going to pick who wins this football game, 49ers versus Vikings. Can the 49ers finally get off the snide in Minnesota and finish the 32-year reign of the Vikings? We're going to talk about all that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way. From off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I love the game preview shows. This is what it's all about. It's about finally figuring out who has the best chance to win this game. And of course, it's going to get proven on the field. But getting the most information that you can possibly get so that you're well-rounded and ready for when the game comes on is very fun. You'll know about the matchups. You'll know about the keys. You'll know where exactly each of these teams are trying to go. And that's what's fun about it. Football is fun when you start talking about X's and O's and the players battling it out on the field. Also, the chess match between coaches. And we've got a lot of that in this football game. And it's not to say that we don't primarily every single week, but this one holds a little bit of a different type of feel. You got Sam Darnold, who was the backup quarterback for the 49ers last year. He's leading the charge in Minnesota. You've got a very unique defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, and he was able to stifle the 49ers offense in 2023 and hold them to 17 points in that football game. And you just have the fact that the 49ers haven't been able to go to Minnesota and win in 32 years. It just makes for a very cool dynamic. Now, I listed this as one of the toughest games for the 49ers in 2024 because I knew how tough it was to win in Minnesota for the 49ers. Now, things are changing. Every single week, things change, including Christian McCaffrey's availability for this game. He's not available. He's not going to play. The likelihood of Talanoa Hufanga playing, not good. He's listed as doubtful. Expected that he won't be making his season debut this week. You've got injuries on the other side. Jordan Addison will not be playing in this game versus the 49ers. That will have ripple effects, which we're going to talk about in this episode as well. But when you look at what each team has, they still have a lot. Both teams remade their defensive line in many ways. Both teams have remade their secondary in many ways. You've got a lot of talent, and you've got two signal callers that like to take what's there and like to be very efficient. In fact, they were the number 1 and 2 as far as efficiency last week. You had Brock Purdy at number 1, Sam Darnold close behind at number 2. And Darnold was absolutely cooking, completing over 72% of his passes. In fact, I think it was 79% of his passes. Ridiculous. This one's going to be fun. And so please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, it's 49ers Cutback on Believe. It's available on all audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. And of course, please give me a 5-star rating. I really appreciate it. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. You think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for a chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. So if you've never joined me for a game preview show, one of the first things I like to do is set the table. So we talked about injuries a little bit with who's going to be in and who's going to be out. There's a couple that are more up in the air. Of course, you got Harrison Smith. You've got, some others as well from Minnesota that are maybe up in the air. So we'll talk about those a little bit. But I also like to go through the coaching staffs because it gives you a clear picture on what kind of scheme they're going to run. And there's familiarity between the coaching staffs amongst these teams. So that familiarity leads to some intriguing opportunities for both to attack and how they're going to respond to the attack of the other. So first off, let's look at the Vikings coaching staff led by Kevin O'Connell, and he handles the play calling duties, and he's handled play calling duties for a while in the NFL. In 2020, he was a part of a coaching staff that was very good under Sean McVay in Los Angeles. The reason I say I know it was very good is because 49ers defensive assistant Brandon Staley was the defensive coordinator on that staff. Familiarity between the two. Then you look over and you see Brian Flores, and Brian Flores' defenses have been great, whether it was his time in New England, his time in Miami as a head coach, or now in Minnesota. He is uniquely gifted in finding unique ways to come after an offense. He's not predictable, and he's very unorthodox. That type of defensive scheme is hard to prepare for, hard to plan for, and it's hard to attack. So you really have to understand what type of things you execute within your offense. You have to understand your offensive rules because when something comes you're not ready for, you have to be able to adjust on the fly. That means everyone, offensive linemen, tight ends, receivers, everyone's got to be able to adjust on the fly. For 49er fans, just go back and look at the Super Bowl. Rules were broken. Spencer Burford didn't understand all the rules of the offense, so when something came that he didn't recognize, Chris Jones came running through scot-free. So you've got to make sure you're on point, especially paying attention to details and being deliberate with everything you do, play in and play out when you're playing a Brian Flores-led defense. Now, when you look also at the coaching staff, one interesting thing that I noticed right off was the fact that Pettin is the linebacker coach. The fact that he's the linebacker coach, he coached one season with Kyle Shanahan in Cleveland, and he was the head coach. Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator, and it wasn't a great relationship. So he's going to be motivated. He also has some understanding of who Kyle is from that as far as the basis. Because the truth is, Kyle Shanahan has evolved every single year. He uses a little bit different stuff here and there. And he's very creative with his motions, his formation shifts, making sure that he can take advantage of the defense. He makes them reveal what they're going to do pre-snap a lot of times. Not all the time. Defenses still get them. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of times he reveals things, makes it easier for Brock Purdy. Number one, Brock Purdy can recognize coverage. Number two, Brock Purdy can get the 49ers out of a bad play and can into a good play. Those are going to be keys in this game. Can the 49ers, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan figure out what Brian Flores is doing pre-snap so they can have success post-snap? Motion and moving are going to be a big way for them to be able to handle it. And all the while, Brian Flores is going to look to attack Brock Purdy, confuse Brock Purdy, and make him feel uncomfortable, which he did last year. One of the big problems with the 49ers in Week 7 last year was negative plays. They've got to eliminate penalties, and they've got to eliminate losses on downs 1 and 2 to make sure third downs are efficient and effective for them. Third and short is the key. Third and long, that's going to be hard to stop this blitz package and pass rush of the Minnesota Vikings. Now, for the 49ers defensive coordinator who's tasked with going against Kevin O'Connell, it's Nick Sorensen. And last week against the Jets, phenomenal. That defense, especially in the first half, felt entirely different than anything we saw from Coach Steve Wilks last year. And it's not that Wilks' scheme was bad, it's just different. I think this scheme more detailed as far as what it's supposed to look like, but also plays into the strengths of the defensive players a little bit more than Wilks. Wilks' defense played in the strengths of a few guys, especially the secondary, where I think that this defense plays into the strengths of the entire defense. It encompasses the entire group, whether that's D-line, linebackers, or the secondary. It's more married together, and I love that. I think Nick Sorensen did a good job. Now he's got his stack upon that. All right, Coach Fred Warner said Coach Sorensen called a flawless game. Well, guess what? This is a new game. You can't live off last week, so he's going to have to do a good job. And that recognition of Brandon Staley, knowing that Brandon Staley's going to be in the booth and he's going to be talking with Nick Sorensen during the game is going to be important because you've got that relationship between O'Connell and Brandon Staley where they went back and forth at each other in practice. And I know that was 4 years ago. But what it does is it gives you a baseline. It doesn't mean things haven't changed, but now that you have a baseline, you can build off that. If you understand somebody's normal philosophy, their normal rules, and their normal tendencies, then you can build a pretty solid game plan. Then when you go over his film and you see how he's adjusted, you can adjust accordingly. So this is going to be a fun matchup, X's and O's wise, when you're talking about the coaching staffs. Then when you look at the way that both teams are going to attack each other, it's not going to be much different. Similar philosophies, as we've seen a little bit of Kevin O'Connell changing some of his offensive philosophies away from a lot of the things that Sean McVay did in the 11 personnel to other personnel packages. We're going to get in that really deep in this as well. So let's talk about the 49ers offensive key to being able to move the football against the Vikings. And it has to start with Jordan Mason and the 49ers running game being effective. No Christian McCaffrey means it's on number 24 to handle business again. Last week, he was phenomenal. 147 yards, right? Averaged 5.1 yards a carry and had a touchdown. And that's with one called back. Could have easily rushed for more yards on the ground if he didn't get some penalties from some of his offensive cohorts. So Jordan Mason was definitely really good. But he's going against a Vikings defense which matched that greatness by how well they played against the Giants. And we can say, oh, it's the Giants and, oh, they're not very good. But they did a really good job. They played sound defensive concepts, and that's one of the things you look at. Now, the 49ers can find ways to run the football. There are avenues, especially with the way the Flores attacks, a lot of times with a five-man look and front, and he did it a lot last year too. Put a lot of guys at the line of scrimmage, try to make the 49ers adjust out of their run game and what they want to do, try to make it so they can't run traps, they can't run their outside zone. He just put a lot of bodies there to somewhat confuse and take away from the blocking. They held the Giants to 74 yards, which is impressive. And the 49ers know they've got to rush for over 100 yards. Key for the 49ers in any football game is to run the ball over 35 times. If you run the ball over 35 times, you're in control of the game. You're controlling the clock. You're controlling possessions. And you're probably playing from in front. If you run the ball over 40 yards, Kyle Shanahan is nearly undefeated every single time he does that. So that is one of the reasons the 49ers love running the football. Balance, but also taking control of the game, time of possession, and also limiting the amount of times the opposing offense has the football. So that's going to be one of the keys in this football game, is offensively moving the football against the Vikings defense that did really good last week. And, they've got good, talented players. Bernard and Van Ginkel on the outside. You've got some pretty good linebackers with Cashman and Pace who are going to come up, fly up, and make plays. Good defensive line as well. Grenard that's going to play off the edge. He's going to do a good job. Pretty excited about, watching some of these matchups in this game. Of course, last episode I talked about Grenard versus Colt McKivitz and how important that matchup is going to be for the success of the San Francisco 49ers in this football game. Another matchup that's going to be very important beyond the run game for the 49ers is going to be Jauan Jennings and Deebo Samuel against zone coverage. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings ran some zone coverage against the 49ers and left open some opportunities for the 49ers to be able to, find some places behind linebackers in front of safeties that they could attack. And this stat is from PFF. Deebo Samuel against the Minnesota Vikings zone coverage should be interesting. Deebo ranks 6th in yards per route against zone coverage, and the Vikings run zone coverage 3rd highest in the NFL. But we'll see what happens when we get Deebo Samuel in there against zone coverage. But the reason I bring this up is last year, this matchup didn't exist. Deebo Samuel didn't play against the Minnesota Vikings. But we've seen Jauan Jennings having success in the zone coverage, running the digs and running the deep crossers that Deebo Samuel normally runs. Now, when Deebo makes those plays, those are legitimate potential for house calls. When Jauan makes them, they're great plays. But you're going to have an opportunity to get Deebo in that spot. When you have an aggressive linebacker play, they're going to want to step up and stop that run of Jordan Mason, and they do a pretty good job. But if you're counting on coming up and stopping that run, then you're not getting into your drop in zone. So once the 49ers are capable of marrying that together, that run game with pass game, and getting a good play action look, they're going to be able to find some opportunities for Deebo Samuel and Jauan Jennings in the intermediate crossing routes. And getting those throws are high percentage throws for Brock Purdy. He's very good at it. And also, they can become bigger windows the better you run the football. So that's something I want to watch. Now, last year, 49ers tried to get George Kittle involved in that as well. It had mixed results. Can George Kittle find more success against the Vikings defense this week? I think there's opportunities to do so. Pretty good play from the safeties for the Minnesota Vikings. Harrison Smith is dealing with an injury, a hip injury, so we'll see what his availability is. He was listed as questionable. Last year, Cameron Bynum had the big interception to end the game where Brock Purdy just threw it up. It was not a great throw. We don't know what Brock Purdy was like. I believe he could have been dealing with a concussion at the time, but Bynum played really good last year. And then when you look at the cornerback position, Stephon Gilmore is a big-time upgrade at the position from last year. I think Stephon Gilmore will probably be playing Brandon Ayuk a lot in this game. And then they've got Byron Murphy as well. 49ers very familiar with his game and his time with Arizona. And I think that could be a favorable matchup for the 49ers if they get man looks. But then also they're going to have Joshua Metellus, who else is going to play nickel back as well. So you've got some talented guys out there for the Minnesota Vikings in the secondary, but I expect for the 49ers to be able to take advantage in the passing game and play action, especially if they can establish the run game. That's why it's very important for the 49ers to get a run game going in this matchup. If they do, they're going to have success in the passing game. If they don't, it's going to get more difficult because lack of execution and lack of results in the run game means third and long. And you know what that means? Brian Flores gets to send the kitchen sink at you. And if he does that, it could mean zero coverage. It could mean bringing 7 guys after you. And you better be able to pick them up or Brock Purdy's going to get hit. And that's not good for the 49ers. Staying ahead of the sticks is important, but also being able to run effectively to produce play action opportunities is huge for the 49ers offense in this football game. Debo, Jawan, I look for them to have some success. I look for Brandon Ayuk to get a little bit more targets than last week. Maybe he'll have a little bit of success in this game. And then, we'll see what George Kittle can do. But they're going to have to take the pressure off. And maybe the 49ers early, when the box gets loaded by Flores, might have to throw it to kind of loosen him up. We'll see how Brian Flores plays this. If he wants to make Brock Purdy and the weapons beat him early and take away Jordan Mason, or if he's going to play it straight. And we'll see what happens. Now, let's talk about the 49ers defense and what their goals are. And I think, first off, it starts with stopping the Minnesota Vikings running game. Aaron Jones had 98 yards last week. They were effective on the ground at 4.3 yards per carry. And we've seen the Vikings have success, and they had some success last year with Alexander Mattison against the 49ers as well. So you got to be able to stop the running game. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult because one of the key matchups that I'm afraid of, if you're a 49er fan, you should be looking at this one too, and I guarantee you Kevin O'Connell has spotted this, is Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles against the run game. And last week, Robert Saleh knows Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles as good as anybody, and they ran right at Flannigan-Fowles. They put the 49ers in base 4-3 and ran right at him. Now, the Jets weren't able to stick with it. The Jets didn't run enough 12 personnel, enough 21 personnel. They don't have the talent for it. Number one, they don't occupy a fullback. The Vikings do. But they also didn't have the tight end number 2 to be able to go in there and be a threat in the run game and be able to catch the football. So it was Tyler Conklin. He's not a great blocker. And they didn't have the guy that was going to be able to handle it. So it wasn't sustainable for the Jets. They had to go back to 11 personnel, put 3 wide receivers out there. The Vikings, though, they've been trending a different direction, and they could potentially put DFF on the field way more than the 12 plays that he played last week. And if I was Kevin O'Connell, that's exactly what I would do. So the Vikings are playing more 21 and 12 personnel, putting DFF on the field. Now, playing either 2 tight ends or 3 tight ends on 25.4% of plays last year, that was up from 12% the year before. So 2022, only 12% do they have those. And then TJ Hawkinson's a big reason why. But 25.4% of the time, they played with 2 or 3 tight ends. So think about that as far as snaps go. That means that you're going to get more DFF on the field. Then once you add in the 7.6% of the reps that fullback CJ Ham gets in 2-back sets, that means 21 personnel. You have a team that runs a lot more of heavy sets, putting you in a base 4-3. That will put you in your base over 30% of the time. That means a lot more snaps from DFF. Last week, there was barely any, 12 snaps in the game for DFF. This week, you're talking it could be 25 or 30 snaps. It doubles. When he's in pass coverage, he does a pretty good job. When he's stopping the run, I don't know how effective he's going to be. Now, the 49ers are going to have D. Winters coming back. Don't expect him to push to get on the field right now. I think DFF, this is his job to lose, and he's going to be out there competing, but we'll see what happens. So this is what happened last year with big folks on the field for the Minnesota Vikings. Among the 14 teams that used 12 personnel, that's one running back, 2 tight ends, at least 20% of the time, the Vikings ranked 12th best in expected points added. So they are effective when they have the bigger guys on the field. They have more points being added to their offense. And where they improved was on the ground. The Vikings went from 28th in EPA per play with 11 personnel to 13th with the extra tight end out there. That is why they bring in Oliver during the offseason. So they're getting their extra tight ends, and now they've got Oliver out there to pair with Munt. And I know TJ Hawkinson's not here, but Josh Oliver did a really good job last week, and he's a very good run blocker. So he is a very effective player. When they get him and Hawkinson together, they are going to be problems for a lot of the teams in the NFC North, that's for sure. So you got Munt, you got Oliver. Those guys are going to be handling some business there, and they're really good. And this team has gotten so much better. I mean, you look at Oliver, he ranked 3rd best run blocker with over 200 or more run snaps. Fantastic. So if you see a trend, I mean, what was it this year we heard about? Rams potentially wanting Brock Bowers and willing to trade everything. You see that there's a trend in the league to go more away from 11 personnel. And for the Vikings, it was essential for them to turn away from 11 personnel because you lost Osborne. Osborne's not there. So you got Jordan Addison, you got Justin Jefferson, but then you could go with a lot more 2 tight end sets. You could go a lot more, 12 personnel because you have 2 solid receivers. That's probably the way they were looking to go. Now, Addison's out, no TJ Hawkinson, but can you imagine when those guys are back, this offense has a really good chance to make some really good plays. Now, another player that benefits from these types of looks is Sam Darnold. In 2022, because last year he was backup for Brock and didn't really get to play, Sam Darnold had one of the best stretches of his career when he played for Carolina. He had a 73.3 grade when using play action and a 56.7 without it. So in the 55 play action attempts, he only had 1 turnover-worthy play and 1 sack, and he went 33 of 55 for 8.2 yards per attempt. So this is what we're talking about with marrying offense. You have an effective run game with Aaron Jones. It turns into a play action with big bodies on the field, and all of a sudden you can get the ball to Oliver and Munt, and that'll help out Justin Jefferson, and that'll help out Jalen Naylor, who's probably stepping in for Jordan Addison as wide receiver too. So it's going to be huge, and this is a big part of the Minnesota Vikings game moving forward, and the 49ers are probably going to deal with more Oliver, Munt, and Ham playing out there, especially with the injury to Jordan Addison, because the Vikings, they didn't have another receiver catch the football. It was basically Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor, and then it was backs out of the backfield. Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones, but no real help from any of the other wide receivers. What are you going to get from Trent Sherfield? What are you going to get, from some of the other guys like Powell on the field? That's going to be a big question in this game. So big formations for Minnesota Vikings against the San Francisco 49ers, putting Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles on the field and testing that 49ers run defense, I think is going to be a huge matchup in this game. Something Minnesota looks to take advantage of. And right now, I think they do have an advantage. Talked about Oliver's ability to block. The 49ers are going to have to figure that thing out. We'll see what they do. And of course, games are fluid. If the 49ers can get up early, they could potentially get Kevin O'Connell away from the run game a little bit, and that might help. But that's saying the 49ers get a lead early. So that's going to be a key matchup. And then the other question is always, how to handle Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the league. There's no arguments for me. I think he's fantastic. Now, without Jordan Addison and Naylor only having one catch last week, I think the 49ers should pay a lot of attention to Justin Jefferson and make the tight ends Oliver and Munt and make Naylor and Powell and Sherfield beat them. I think that's one of the keys in this football game is let's go ahead, let's take away Justin Jefferson, and let's make the role players fulfill their role and take advantage. Make Sam Darnold come away from 18 and have to find someone else. I think that's going to be a key. I mean, and, I talked about that stat earlier. Naylor's the only other wide receiver that had a catch, not named Jordan Addison or Justin Jefferson. So make them prove that those guys can get open. Now, 49ers, familiar with Trent Sherfield. He's a good blocker, really fast, spent time in San Francisco, in Miami, in Buffalo. Great special teams player. Had the big touchdown in 2022, the Brock Purdy game where he came in after Jimmy G got hurt. First play of the game, touchdown. It was fantastic. But we know what his limitations are as well. So can he catch a ball here or there? Absolutely. Are you worried about him over, dynamically killing you down the field? No. So I think that's something to watch. So handling Justin Jefferson, they're going to give safety help whenever possible. They're going to give bracket coverage whenever possible. And they're going to roll coverage his way and make everyone else win. And when you have cornerbacks like they do with Isaac Yedem and De'Amara Lenore, and, of course, all-pro Charvarius Ward, who had a big game last year against Minnesota, had an interception. Unfortunately, we would have had the other interceptions against Jordan Addison. That would have been a different game. But that's a different story. Addison made the play, and you got to tip your cap. I mean, he wrestled the ball away and took off to the house. So that's going to be another key in this game, and I wonder if the Vikings have enough when it comes to the third wide receiver now that Jordan Addison is hurt. Now, let's talk about third downs a little bit, and a lot of the Minnesota Vikings come into chat, and I really appreciate you guys leaving comments. Somebody pointed out that the Vikings being third down conversion percentage being 30 is skewed because of circumstance in the game. And yeah, I believe that as well. Circumstances definitely skew stats. As we go through the year, it'll give us a clearer picture. But the 49ers converted at 46% last week on third down, and that's really good. But the Vikings were really good on defense at 38%, giving up third down conversions. So defensively, the Vikings were fantastic. 49ers were fantastic on offense. Something's going to have to give there. You need to be effective and be able to move the sticks. 49ers won the time of possession last week against the Jets and doubled them up at the end of the half. Those things are huge in this football game. So Vikings being able to get off the field on third down, 49ers being able to stay on the field on third down are going to be a huge part of this game. And then the 49ers weren't great on third down last week. The same way that Minnesota number looks skewed with only 30% conversion rate by their offense. It's skewed also for the 49ers as far as defense, where it was basically all in one drive. And then after that, there just wasn't a lot of third downs. 49ers getting off the field because of turnovers and other things. But I will say this, 49ers need to be a lot better on defense on third down. Part of the reason Brandon Staley is in San Francisco. Now, red zone offense last week, the Minnesota Vikings were absolutely phenomenal. The Minnesota Vikings scored on every opportunity in the red zone, 100% touchdown rate, 3 touchdowns in the red zone. Got to give credit to Sam Darnold, to Aaron Jones in that offense, Justin Jefferson with a big fourth down conversion for a touchdown. So give them credit. 49ers weren't as successful. Last year, the 49ers were the number 1 team in the red zone in the entire league. A lot of that has to do with the weapons and Christian McCaffrey. No Christian McCaffrey. 49ers struggled a little bit more in the red zone. Last week, they kicked 6 field goals. Good thing Jake Booty made all of them, but still, you need to get more touchdowns than field goals. That game could have easily been 50 points for the 49ers. They just weren't as effective in the red zone as they've been last year, and a lot of that, I think, has to do with Christian McCaffrey. 49ers at 40%. They got to get that number up. They've got to be more effective and efficient in the red zone. And, we'll see. Now, 49ers last year had the 8th best red zone defense. We'll see if they can keep this thing going. Now, let's look at the turnovers a little bit here. And last week, the 49ers had 0 turnovers. Keep that going. Last year, you turned it over a lot against Minnesota. They capitalized. They beat you. Vikings had 2 giveaways last week. A Sam Darnold interception was one of the highlights. So Darnold needs to take care of the football against the 49ers, and the 49ers want Darnold to throw it to them. De'Amara Lenore jokingly said him and Sam Darnold have a great relationship. Darnold likes to throw him the football, referring to their time last year in practice. 49ers had 2 takeaways last week. Interception by DFF, tipped by De'Amara Lenore, and of course the Fred Warner punch-out. And so the Vikings also had 2 takeaways, 2 interceptions. Van Ginkel, pick 6. Harrison Smith, interception at the goal line. So they were making plays. Now, 49ers have a 2 turnover differential advantage. They're +2. Vikings at even because they turned it over twice and they got 2 turnovers. But the 49ers did a really good job of making sure, once again, they stay ahead of it. And they are always one of the best over the last couple of years as far as turnover differential. Fred Warner said they want 3 turnovers a game. That's their goal. They didn't reach it last week. They're going to try to make up for it this week. It's always tough. And now it's time for the Wow That's Bold predictions, brought to you by 49erscutbackshop.com, where you can get all your 49ers related gear and 49ers Cutback Shop gear. But Wow That's Bold coming up next.
Wow, that's really bold. Whoa. Whoa. Whoa.
It's got to be really bold. It's got to be whoa. And so, you don't know what Wow That's Bold predictions are. I give predictions for what could happen in this game. Last week, I did pretty good. Had a couple that worked out. Sometimes I'll hit them all. Sometimes I won't hit any. But it's just stuff that I see on film, and I got to predict what I think is going to happen in this game. Offensive Wow That's Bold prediction. I think Brandon Ayuk's going to get his first touchdown of the season. Last week, had an opportunity in the back of the end zone, was unable to make the catch. I think we're going to see a different Brandon Ayuk in this game, and I think he's going to have an opportunity. He's going to take advantage of it. Ayuk touchdown. Now, I think we're going to get a fullback touchdown in this game, too. I think Kyle Juszczyk is going to find pay dirt, and he's going to get a touchdown as well, and it'll be a 49ers mismatch that comes advantage for Kyle Juszczyk. He gets ignored, and I think he's going to make a play for a touchdown. And then I threw in a bonus offensive Wow That's Bold for this one. Isaac Guerendo is going to get his first carries of the season. McCaffrey's going to be officially out. Jordan Mason carried 28 times last week. Of course, they have another veteran that they could go with, but they played Guerendo a little bit last week, and I look for Guerendo to get involved now that they know the groin is healthy. And so I expect Isaac Guerendo to get his first carries. I don't know if it'll be a lot, but they'll sprinkle in a couple carries, take a little bit of the rushing stats away from Deebo Samuel in this game. So those are my Wow That's Bold offensive predictions. Now, defense. I think this is going to be probably one of the most bold statements that I've made as Wow That's Bold in a while, is I think the 49ers are going to keep Justin Jefferson out of the end zone. I think they're gonna watch him. They're gonna play him completely. They're gonna put it on the supporting cast to make plays, and I think they're gonna stop Justin Jefferson from getting in the end zone. I don't think they're gonna stop him. I still think he's gonna get yards. He's gonna make catches. He's gonna get first downs. I just think they hold him out of the end zone in this one. And then I got Fred Warner getting an INT and a sack in this game. Fred just makes plays. He's all pro Fred for a reason. And it's not going to change in this one. I think he's going to read Sam Darnold. He's going to get a pick. And I also think that they're going to bring him on a blitz and he's going to get a sack in this football game. And that's exactly what the 49ers need to win. So that's the Wow That's Bold predictions brought to you by 49erscutbackshop.com. Go check it out. Go get your merch. Lots of cool stuff there. And now it's time for the score prediction. And, this one was tough to figure out because I do believe the Minnesota Vikings have a good football team. And I think that there are some key injuries that are holding them back a little bit from their full potential. And I think it starts with TJ Hawkinson. I think that one, when he gets back and you get him and Oliver out there together, that's going to be really tough to beat. You also have the fact that they're going to be missing Jordan Addison, which is going to be huge. And I'm taking into account the 49ers are missing Christian McCaffrey and what that could mean against a Brian Flores defense that's very aggressive and doesn't have to prepare for a weapon like Christian McCaffrey. So taking all that into account and the 49ers not winning in Minnesota in 32 years, it got really difficult to figure out. But I landed on a score prediction that I think is entirely plausible, and I think the 49ers and Vikings will probably come pretty close to this score. I think the San Francisco 49ers are going to win. They're going to end the 32-year streak. The House of Horrors in Minnesota is going to finally come to an end. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be a battle. I think there are going to be a lot of contentious moments in this game, but I think the 49ers are going to get it done 24-17, a touchdown game over Sam Darnold and the Vikings, and I think that's part of the reason I think the 49ers are going to get some turnovers from Sam Darnold in this game. I think the defense is going to slow up Aaron Jones. They're going to keep Justin Jefferson out of the end zone, and that's going to be enough to keep the Vikings from being able to overcome the 49ers in this game. But it's going to be hard fought. It's going to be a fun game to watch, and I'm excited for it. I honestly am. And, of course, just like always, let me know your score prediction down in the comment section down below. I want to know what you think. Vikings fans, 49er fans, hey, just let me know. I'm curious. I expect Viking fans to pick the Vikings to win. No shock here. I'm curious what everyone's seeing because it's a unique matchup and a fun matchup to watch. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. 49ers Cutback on Believe. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Join me for the game reaction show immediately following the game. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about what happened and what's next for the 49ers and for the Vikings, so join me for that. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.